Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
We're talking about the spiritual path today, and I wanted to call today's consciousness talk spirituality versus religion. So let's call that the subtitle of today's talk. And I was motivated by an uncomfortable situation that I had a few days ago. I had posted something on Facebook. Now, we all know that everybody argues over Facebook, which just seems to be the common thing nowadays, which is probably why I stay off of it as much as I can. But I posted something in regards to, it was a post dealing with going to, that whole idea of, that pay it forward thing that everybody's talking about. Oh, pay it forward. And somebody had written a meme I thought was really great. It was a tweet or something. And it said, well, the next time you're, pay it forward is all good and done, good. But the next time you're in a place like Starbucks or Whole Foods or one of these, uppity, upper income places, instead of paying it forward to the car behind you at Starbucks, which can afford, most likely they can afford that $8 cup of coffee, why don't you give that $8 tip to the barista instead? Because most of the time that people go to these places, they can usually afford that. They don't necessarily need to have it paid forward. And don't get me wrong, yeah, it's a wonderful idea, and it's very nice to share good things. So this woman, who is an acquaintance of mine here locally, started, I don't want to say berating me, but she disagreed, but apparently it really bothered her because she came back on a couple hours later and said, for someone who's so spiritual, you sure are very negative. You post negative things. And it got me thinking, because it's not the first time that someone has done and used that, I don't know, personal attack of, oh, you're supposed to be spiritual. Why are you posting these negative things? Because the reality of it is, it's been happening to me since I started doing this work on social media back in 2006, 2007. Oh, well, if you're supposed to be so positive, why are you posting this negative stuff? Talking about government corruption, or talking about white privilege, or talking about racism, or talking about bigotry. And again, it's been common over the last few years. But the thing is, and the reason why I'm bringing it up today, since we are talking about the spiritual path, is that it seems that people get confused with the idea that being spiritually conscious means that you are all, sunshine and butterflies and rainbows and unicorns or whatnot, when in reality, I believe the opposite is true. As we peel away the layers toward our authentic self and become more honest with ourselves, we begin to become more intuitive, sensitive, empathetic, perhaps might be the term I'm looking for, to the world's problems, whether it be war, famine, racism, etc., etc., etc. And these things begin to bubble, and they come up to the surface. And there's a meme going around of mine that, one of the things about spiritual awakening is eventually it evokes a sense of social responsibility, that you feel a need to heal the world. You feel a need to heal those that are hurting. You feel a need to have compassion for all human beings, for our whole entire human family. And with that, sometimes you're going to get negative feelings. And what I mean by negative feelings is, feelings of outrage, feelings of anger, feelings, and it may come off maybe a little assertive or abrasive. it doesn't mean you're not spiritual. If anything, that means, I believe it means you're becoming more authentic. So I wanted to share this at the beginning of today's show because I feel that it's very important that people do not have this false idea of what spiritual consciousness is all about, or spiritual ascension, that we all become, sunshine and rainbows. Yes, as we move toward inner peace, those moments of inner peace and clarity and whatnot tend to stay longer and longer and longer within our daily waking consciousness. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to get upset when we see, I don't know, white people picking on black people, or black people picking on Hispanics, or et cetera, et cetera. When there is an injustice, we may want to say something about it. We may be moved to say something about it. And therein comes the terminology that I use, sacred activism. For me, it's not about politics. For me, it's about issues. It's about our human family. What can we do to heal our human family? What can we do to bring balance and justice for everyone on the planet? It doesn't matter your political affiliation. It's about healing the planet and hopefully correcting negative behaviors that we've been doing to one another over the last thousands of years, for that matter. Anyway, so if you are one of these people that do get very passionate about issues, and people say that you're not spiritual because you're so passionate about these issues, just, you know what? It's something that you said that triggered, and I don't want to be like cliche and use that word trigger. It made them uncomfortable about something that they're doing. Because, for example, the woman who was telling me this is a well-off white woman who kind of attacked me. So I was like, well, you know what? She must have felt something, must have struck a nerve with her own behavior, and she didn't appreciate me bringing it to the surface. But you're okay. You're still spiritual. Don't think that. I'm noticing behind me my cats are playing, so enjoy them, but listen to what I'm saying. Anyway, I want to say hi to a few of you. Let's see who's out there. Hi, Terry. Good to see you. Hi, Pedro. Thank you. And actually, Pedro, that your questions that you posted is actually one of the questions on my list today that I received. So let's start with the first question that you guys sent to me, and I start with this one because, again, it really struck out to me, because I think it's the same with all of us, and it has a lot to do with what we were just talking about. The question is, Bernard, I'm working really hard on my ego, but it's very fatiguing. Is this normal? Working on our ego, but it's very fatiguing. Well, first of all, I need to understand what you mean by working on your ego. If we are working to differentiate the voice between our higher self and our ego, to me, that's working on our ego, being able to tell the difference between our ego and our higher self. We have ego for a reason, and I want to make that very clear. Again, we have this tendency in Western spirituality to think that ego is this negative thing. It is a tool. I believe it's Ram Dass that says, and I say this all the time, that the ego is a wonderful tool but a terrible master. The ego helps us keep time. The ego gets us to work on time. The ego gets us dressed without putting on our clothes inside out. The ego tells us what we like, what we don't like. So the ego is a great tool. When you're becoming fatigued, take a break. Whether it is for what I'm getting out of this, I'm working hard on my ego. It's very fatiguing. It means you're working too hard. You're trying to suppress something. You're trying to resist your ego. If you're resisting your ego, of course you're going to get tired. The secret here is to acknowledge that's the ego and say, there's my ego. Oh, I hate her. She's got ugly hair, or he's fat, or she's, this, or he's that, or whatnot. Or I'm this and I'm that. I'm one of the worst people at self-pointing when it comes to my ego. We have to realize that that's just one aspect of us, and just say, oh, there's the ego, and let it go. And when you begin to understand that probably 80% of your thoughts are your ego, you're going to realize that it's just chatter. Just let the chatter go. Stop trying to control the chatter. And if it really is getting to you, be assertive, be proactive, and take a deep breath. And just do a mindful moment, do a mindful meditation. Take 3 breaths, take 5 breaths, count your breath, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that chatter will slow down. Unless you're in a full-fledged panic attack, and that's a whole another topic. But if you're being fatigued, just let it go. Take a break. Let your ego play. I mean, maybe it just needs to play a little bit. We all need to play a little bit, and that's all right. That doesn't mean you're not spiritual because you're having fun, or you're putting on makeup, or wearing nice clothes. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're not hurting anybody, do what you will. I mean, it's okay. The ego's not evil. It's when it controls us that we can have some issues. So I'm going to move on. Is there a difference between... oh, this is good. Is there a difference between settled into calm and settled into complacency? Very, very, very good question. So, I've lived this myself, so I can relate to it in my experience on my spiritual path, where I became so peaceful, and especially in the beginning. I don't know how long you all have been following me. For those of you that have been following me for the last 10 years, you know that at the very beginning, I got rid of all my physical possessions. I basically allowed myself to be homeless and couch hop for a year or two, and just have absolutely 100% focus on consciousness, on peace, and just let everything else fall away. And that was good at the beginning. It was important for me to shake things up and to kind of live the tower card, if you all know what the tower card is. I needed to live the tower card in order to create this new path that I was called to live. But there comes a point where when we are in that inner peace, when we are in that state of calm, that the things that our spirit might be guiding us to do to benefit ourselves or to benefit others gets overlooked. And that is where complacency starts coming into play. We cannot resist life. We cannot resist society. We cannot resist day-to-day responsibility. We cannot resist self-care. We can't resist these things, all in the name of inner peace. It's almost as if when people get into that state of mind, and I am one of them, I have to admit, I was guilty of this, of getting addicted to that bliss, getting addicted to that, I'm at peace, I don't need anything, I don't need anyone, and it creates conflict when we do that. It creates conflict within our own lives. So it's very important to understand there is a difference in being centered and grounded and mindful and being walking and living in peace versus being complacent. A good example from me observing the outside world, many people will become so enamored with their peace and so enamored with their happy thoughts and positive thoughts that they ignore what's happening in the world around them. They might ignore friends that are in need, or finding them to be negative. Oh, they're drama. I don't want life drama. That we hear that a lot. We hear that a lot. It's like, oh, I don't need your drama. I'm in peace. Well, it may not be drama. It might just be life. It might just be that that person just got laid off and they're getting kicked out of their house and they need help. It might just be that someone had a heart attack and they can't control that and they need help. It's not drama. Sometimes it's just life. So yes, we want to walk in a path of peace. We want to be proactive versus reactive, but we cannot ignore the suffering of others. We cannot ignore self-care. We cannot ignore personal responsibility. When we ignore personal responsibility and we become complacent in our personal responsibility, we lose our integrity. Now, I define integrity as doing what you say. If you say you're going to do something, then do it. If you don't do it, you're breaking away that you're breaking away that, how should we say, that commitment you make to your higher self to be the best that you can be. So don't lose integrity. Don't become complacent. And by the way, that state of calm, yes, it needs to be worked on. We have to be able, and I say this a lot. One of the first lessons I got was from one of my shamanic teachers that said a true shaman has the ability to alter the state of consciousness at will and has one foot on every plane of consciousness: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, universal. In order for us to be able to do that, we have to learn to shift between the worlds, the shift between the dimensions, so to speak. So while at times I can be completely at bliss and be completely peaceful and loving everybody, on a certain plane of consciousness, I might be aggravated by that jerk who cut me off driving on the 3D consciousness, so to speak. So it's being able to maneuver through those and to do that proactively and peacefully. Don't become complacent just because you're a good meditator, or you're good at yoga, or your life is perfect right now and you're happy. Doesn't work like that. Well, hello from Ireland. I just saw someone saying hi from Ireland. Okay, here's the next question. I wonder how much time we're going to have for all these questions. I promise. Well, I try not to promise. Actually, yes, I did say it's on my integrity. I am going to go through and answer some of these questions. That's someone I said I would answer today. But the next question is really good. Does each person have certain lessons to learn or goals to achieve in life? Wow. Okay. Do we have certain lessons to learn or goals to achieve in life? That's up to your karma. This is a great intro into karma. So what do I mean by that? Why is it your karma? Karma for me is no matter what lifetime we're in, whether it's this lifetime or the one before or even the one moving into the future, whatever it is, whatever dimension, whatever timeline we're living in, whatever lifetime we're living in, every action and every thought has an energetic ripple. Every action and every thought has an energetic ripple. This show that we're doing right now, this talk that we're having right now, is going to have an energetic ripple effect around your life, around my life. And just like dropping a pebble into the middle of a still bird bath, like a bird bath. Make believe that we're seeing a still bird bath. We're dropping the pebble in the middle. And what happens? The water begins to ripple out to the edges, and it ripples back in. So throughout our lifetimes, every thought and every action has created these ripples, and it will come back, positive or negative. Positive or negative, it comes back. And I don't see karma as positive or negative. It's how we perceive it and what our perspective is on how we see it, whether it's positive or negative. However, these are the lessons that we have. These are the goals that we have. We have to one, enjoy the positive that is being sent toward us, and B, to understand the negative and why is this negative rippling back into our lives, so that we can overcome it, so we can move through it. We can't resist the negative that comes into our life. We can only learn from it, and we can only move through it. As far as the positive, enjoy every moment of it, absorb it, learn from it so you can do it again. But yes, do we have certain lessons to learn or goals to achieve in life? We most certainly do. We also have a purpose, and I'm going to have to go into that a little bit later. We're not going to have enough time in this section. Real quick, I got about 2 or 3 more minutes on before the commercial break. Someone asked me, is there a freezing spell? Now, what's a freezing spell? What do you mean by that? I'll share with you the one that I use. I use a freezing spell when, let's say, you've got someone who's just really after you, and they're really like out to get you, whether it be for a good reason or no reason, but they're sending you negativity, they're egging your house, they're crank calling you, they're keying your car, whatever. Someone that becomes a nuisance, and it could be a family member, And remember, karma, magic, we do not want to suppress anyone, harm none, do what thou will. However, a freezing spell cools that person off. Oh, darn, I'm going to have to get back to that after this break. So we'll be right back, and I'll finish up the freezing spell. So before the break, I was talking about the freezing spell. So before we even go into spells, let me just say this. First of all, yeah, I don't have an issue with intentions or doing spells. Sometimes we need to protect ourselves, and sometimes we just need a little help to bring that energy into our life. So it's kind of like that drop, that little pebble we dropped, creating that ripple. It's a little bit more of a focused ripple, basically. We're doing ripples every day. For me, spells are focused ripples. With that in mind, if you are going to do any type of spell or magic or intention, remember, for the highest good of yourself and all of those involved, and make sure it's not to harm anyone. Now, the freezing spell to me is a defensive spell. It's you protecting yourself from someone who might be attacking you, someone who might be harassing you, or someone who's causing you heartache that just won't leave you alone, and it's become an issue in your life. So with the freezing spell, it's not to do any harm. It is literally to kind of calm their energy down. And the way that we do that is we get a glass jar and paint it black. At least this is the way I do the freezing spell. You get a glass jar, you paint it black using a Sharpie or some kind of acrylic paint or something. Make sure it has a lid that you can close on top of it. And you're going to need a picture or a drawing or something that symbolizes that person. And you're going to drop it into the jar. You're going to fill the jar with water, seal it, and then stick it in the freezer and let it freeze. Again, the intention of this is to calm them down so they stop harassing you, so they leave you alone. Kind of like the energy behind it is to make them forget you and for you not to be a focus for them. So again, remember, we don't want to harm anyone. We're just trying to protect ourselves and our property and our life and whatnot, and our mental stability sometimes with some people. Anyway, let's move on to the next question. Here's a good one. How do I learn to suppress my emotions so I'm not so emotional? Why? Why do we want to suppress our emotions? Some people are more emotional than others. I'm extremely emotional. I'm a Cancer, Pisces. I've got lots of water. That emotional, I've learned to turn it into a positive where it gives me more empathy, more compassion, more intuition, allows me to connect with my intuition. If we suppress a part of ourselves, again, the word suppression is the key word I'm focusing on here, you're resisting. And remember the saying, that which we resist persists. So I would suggest not trying to learn to suppress your emotions, but perhaps the issue is learning tools to react differently, perhaps. Neuroplasticity comes to mind, creating new pathways in the mind so we don't react so negatively. Perhaps we're talking about negative emotions or being too emotionally, I don't want to use the word weak, but oversensitive. So be aware of that. Be aware, are you being over emotional? Are you being oversensitive? And if that's the issue and it's causing you, it's disrupting your life, it's disrupting your inner peace and whatnot, then yes, it's time to learn tools to better channel that type of emotion. So don't try to suppress it. Be aware of it, understand it. Understand why are you being so emotional. Maybe there's some work that needs to be done in the sense of maybe a past trauma or something. A lot of times, if that is the case, that you, and I find it is the case most of the time with most of the people that I work with, that when they react a certain way, over emotional to a certain way, it usually has to do with some trauma that happened in their life, some kind of crisis that they never really quite got over. Shamanic soul retrieval is very helpful for that. I do have several videos on my YouTube channel that will help you. Very popular one right now, removing shamanic soul retrieval and removing black magic. It's a very powerful tool. Anyway, don't suppress, don't resist, understand, and understand why are you so emotional, and turn it into a positive. I find that emotion is a great way to enhance our intuitive ability, and emotion is a great way. For me, I kind of sense it like my spidey senses. I call it my spidey senses. When I'm getting emotional for no reason, there's something going on, and I need to become aware of it. So perhaps I need to look at the world around me, or see my relationships with friends, or be aware of something that might be going on underneath what I'm seeing within those relationships in that realm of my physical material world. Is there a truth spell? There probably is a truth spell. I've seen a couple of them. I don't recommend it. I find that if someone's not telling you the truth, you don't want them in your life. If you don't trust someone to tell you the truth, you don't want them in your life. This is more about you, the individual. I think that truth spells are, again, working with someone's free will. I don't recommend doing magic spells or intentions that are going to affect someone's free will. But is there a truth spell? That short answer is yes. I would say, why do you need a truth spell? And if you do need a truth spell with a particular person, perhaps we need to dig a little deeper into that relationship you have with that person on why you need to do that. Easily, I would suggest doing divination other than a truth spell on somebody. Do a divination, use a pendulum, a simple yes or no chart to get your answer, using a pendulum, or better yet, you let somebody else use a pendulum, because a lot of times our subconscious will force answers. I never give myself readings for that very reason, because if I don't like the answer, I don't trust my brain not to try to interpret it into the way I want it to be interpreted. So ask someone to do a pendulum for you and just do simple yes or no questions, or do a reading. If you're looking for an answer, there are other ways than imposing your will through magic on another individual, which is a big no-no. Okay, so we do have some questions here live on the feed that I want to get to, and to answer one quickly. Pedro asks, does our higher self have karma? That's a tough one, and it depends on your definition of higher self and your definition of soul. For me, soul and higher self are a little bit different. I believe that soul is kind of what's reborn, but our higher self is that place just above soul that is the divine aspect of us. So it would be beyond duality, and it would be beyond the idea that it would have karma, because it would be in that divine realm of clarity and without karma. I believe our souls have karma, but I can't really say, again, this is just my definition. I wouldn't believe the higher self has karma, because that's the part of us that is eternal and infinite. Is there any way to see my purpose? And I think I touched on this at the very beginning, and that's a really good question. I can only answer how I found my purpose, and that was through a shamanic vision quest. I was very lucky. I got to meet my guides, and before they let me come back into my physical body, I was told what my soul's purpose is and what my life's purpose is. You don't need to be that extreme. You can always ask your higher self for, and when I say extreme, I mean shamanic vision quest can be a very tough process on the physical body and the mental body, the emotional body, and some people don't want to take that medicine to go through that. But you can always ask your higher self, learn to communicate with your higher self, be aware of your life. What is your life telling you? What are you drawn to? I like the way Abraham talks about that vortex, What puts you in the vortex? Where is your source consciousness pushing you? In what direction? What do you feel drawn to? Following your bliss, as Joseph Campbell says, is usually the best way to find out what your life's purpose. With that, I have a cute story that I always tell quite often, but again, a lot of people ask, what is life's purpose? And I went to one of those ESTS trainings. They called it Landmark at that back when I went. It was already evolved to a new company or whatnot. But anyway, at the very beginning of the session, it was a 3-day session. It was a very intense, very emotionally draining. You know, they kind of like tear your ego apart and kind of rebuild you into this, like, you know, clear thinking, honest self-honesty was, you know, pretty much what the whole session is all about. But at the beginning of the 3-day seminar, they said, and at the end of the seminar, we're going to tell you what the meaning of life is. And, you know, here we are on bated breath, finally the last day. We all get our certificate, and we graduate and whatnot. And we're like, hey, you said you were going to tell us what the meaning of life is. And they said, oh, yeah. The meaning of life is the fact that life has no meaning. And the fact that it has no meaning has no meaning. That kind of like, that was a very Buddhist koan, you know, whoa, you know, we put meaning into life. What we do, what makes us happy, what gives us fulfillment is what I got out of that. So we are the ones that put meaning into life, and our purpose is to bring meaning into our life. Someone asked me, do I pray? And being that I'm very vocal about organized religion and my dislike of most organized religion, some people might think I don't pray. I do pray. For me, prayer is, you know, that old definition, prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening, as they say. That's a simplified version, but quite honestly, I pray to the goddess Isis. I do. And I've had an affinity with the goddess Isis since my childhood. And I see her as this mother figure, this loving, healing, magical mother figure. And when I'm down and out and I'm desperate and I need help, I do. I pray to Isis. I talk to her and, you know, ask her for guidance. I ask her for clarity. I ask her for healing, for help, assistance, whatever it might be. You know, do I believe there's this like being watching over me? Well, I believe my guides are with me, and it's funny. They talk to me more than I talk to them. So, but the answer is yeah. Of course, I pray. Yeah, I do pray. I believe it's important that we have the ability to communicate with some type of higher power, and you know, we can pray. We can say things when we are praying that we may not say to a friend, that we may not say to a parent, or you know, to a teacher, an elder, or a mentor. With prayer, you have complete confidentiality, so to speak. You can feel comfortable to say whatever it is that you need and what you want. And if anything, whether you believe in entities or energies or source consciousness or guides or whatever, if anything, you're bringing things up to the surface out of your subconscious into your conscious, so you can actually work on them. So if anything, whether it's spiritual or not, I believe prayer is a great inner dialogue to have. How can I see my aura? Well, auras are a difficult thing for me. I don't see auras. It's not one of my gifts. I'm clairaudio, I'm clairvoyant, but I've never had the ability to see auras. Are there techniques? Yes, I've tried them. I've taken classes on trying to see auras. Sometimes I'll see auras in photographs, but as far as like on people and on animals and things like that, there's not. But the one thing I remember about learning to see auras was they tell you to really relax your eyes and kind of just like squint a little bit and just let your eyes kind of get very relaxed. But you have to focus on the person or animal or whatever it is that you're looking at. But no, I can't see auras, so if you can't, it's not a big deal. We all have different gifts, and you don't have to have every single gift. And sometimes those gifts that you have, you may not have your whole life. When I was younger, I used to be able to astral project like that, easily. In my teens and my 20s, I had really easy astral projection. I think the only thing that's really stuck with me over the years is clairvoyant, intuitive. I give a killer tarot reading, but I've never been able to see the auras. I can work with energy. I can direct energy. I can have you sense and feel energy when I'm sending it to you, but I've never been an aura person. But anyway, I hope that answers your question and that guides you in the right direction to kind of maybe learn more about auras. So someone says, what are the characteristics of meditation, prayer, chanting, and so forth? Hold on a second. There's a snowplow going by. Thank goodness we needed it. What are the characteristics of meditation, prayer, chanting, and so forth? I don't quite understand the question, so I will do my best to describe each of them ever so quickly. For me, the characteristics of meditation is quieting the mind. The goal of meditation is to quiet the mind so much where you can see the beginning, middle, and end of every thought, and that space between the thought, and then see the beginning of the next new thought, the middle, and the end, and the space between, and to finally be able to sit in between the thoughts and just have quiet connection with your higher self and source consciousness. So going to the place between the thoughts. Characteristics of meditation, there are so many different types of meditation. I do Zen meditation. I believe in counting my breath. I talk about it all the time. Take a deep breath, and then just breathe regularly and count your breath. And again, counting that breath alters your state of consciousness out of that chatter, out of that ego chatter. So to me, those are the characteristics of meditation. Prayer, I just discussed prayer. It's being honest, talking to something, a higher source, higher consciousness. Chanting, I actually used to love chanting. There was something else they used to call it. There was another toning. I used to do a lot of toning. I love toning with a group of people, where you just make one sound and everybody makes the same sound, and it comes in different levels and different octaves, and then it just becomes this wonderful harmony of sound that really elevates your consciousness. Chanting, the same thing. Chanting, repeating something over and over again, whether you're singing it or saying it, is intended to alter your state of consciousness. I would say the characteristics of all of these is a tool to alter your state of consciousness. Chanting has a little added bonus where it can be an intention where you can focus on an end result in yourself. I did it recently back in the summer when I wanted to lose 40 pounds, which I have, and I just chanted, I am skinny, I am skinny, I am skinny, and it worked. I sat in front of the mirror, I looked at myself, I envisioned myself, and I felt it, and I just kept saying it over and over and over again. Yes, I used an app to help me be healthy and eat healthy and exercise more, but again, these types of tools help bring up things from our subconscious, brings it to the surface, and gives us the ability to push us forward to take action. So yes, altering your state of consciousness to kind of empower your subconscious to bring these things into life. You know, a lot of these things that we talk about with spirituality and magic and whatnot, you know, there's a part of me of, yeah, there's external help from our ancestors, our source consciousness, our guides and whatnot. But then there's that part of me, that linear logical part of me that says, well, it's just me feeding my subconscious, and my subconscious, these tools are helping me bring it out to the surface. Maybe, metaphysically speaking, it is coming down into our subconscious in order to manifest on this plane of consciousness. Who knows? Those who think they know don't know. Remember that. Are there any spells for love? Oh, yeah. Remember, love spells are wonderful, but you will not be happy with someone unless you're ready to be happy with someone. I think love spells are a little bit tricky. First, I believe we need to work on ourselves. We need to be able to open our heart. We need to be able to make space for another human being in our life. I found that a little bit tricky recently for myself, but they do work. If you just ask the universe to bring someone into your life that is right for you, more times than not, that, again, is it our subconscious or is it Cupid out there? The reality of it is if you do a love spell to bring someone into your life, people will come into your life because, A, you're opening to it, you're creating that vibration, you're sending out that energy, and of course that energy is going to come back to you. The thing about love spells is you never do it on another person, ever. Again, imposing your will on another human being. We don't do that. It's not right, and that is karma that will come back and bite you. A quick story, we're running out of time, about these type of will, imposing our will on other people's spells. I was in Miami heading up to Tampa to see my partner at the time. And I took a train. I love trains. I decided I was going to take the train. And I take the train, and while I'm waiting to get on board, I saw this guy with a pentagram and this other guy with a pentagram, and he saw my pentagram, and it was like, oh, look, are you Satanist? Are you Wiccan? Are you this? I was like, well, I consider myself pagan, blah, blah, blah. And I started talking a little bit about my work, and he was like, well, I'm a left pather, he said, left pather. I was like, oh, so you do black magic? And he's like, yeah, and whatever. We ended up talking the whole time. Actually, I spoke to him like for 5 hours. But the one thing I will never forget was I said, well, doesn't bad stuff happen to you for doing black magic on other people and imposing your will on other people? He was like, oh God, yeah, all the time. That's how I know it works. Last time I did this, I broke my arm, and that's how I knew my spell worked. I'm like, oh, do you want your life to be full of anguish and pain and whatnot? Do you want negative things to come back to let you know your black magic is working? I mean, I don't know. You're a nice guy and all. But he went on another train after the stop. But just remember that. Love spell, any kind of spell, you are not to impose your will on another human being. You can impose protection around yourself. You can attract love to yourself. You can ask questions, when it comes to, this truth spell that we were just talking about. Use divination, but don't force your will on another person. It's going to come back to you, and it's going to bite you. And during my early years, I practiced a little bit of gray magic, and even that was a little iffy. And not that there's black, white, or gray, but there's karma. I know a lot of people don't like the terminology of white, gray, or black magic. Magic is magic. It's what you put into it and what you get back out of it. Okay, I got about 1 second, well, about 2 minutes left, so let me do this really quick. I've been working to stop thinking all week, and I don't think I'm doing very well. I love that. I've been working to stop thinking, and I don't think I'm doing very well. Well, because you're thinking. That's exactly it. The chatter goes on no matter what. How many of us wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning? The chatter, the chatter, the chatter, the chatter. That is where meditation comes in. That is where taking a deep breath, counting your breath, being the master of your mind. Remember, the path of spirituality is about mindfulness. The path of spirituality is about being centered. The path about spirituality is creating intention and intending your life versus reacting to your life. If you're having an issue with thinking, learn how to slow down your thinking. Sometimes music will help, sometimes prayer will help, sometimes incense will help, sometimes just taking a deep breath and letting it go. And just take a few deep breaths. Let that chatter stop. Think of something else. I used to visualize. I would visualize the thoughts that I had no control over, especially as someone. I had a lot of panic attacks in my youth, and I would see all those thoughts like coming at me, and I would visualize like a pentagram of light, and I'd shoot it at it, and I'd see the pentagram blow up the thoughts, So that might be a way. That was my tool I gave myself. I would just shoot a golden pentagram at the thoughts just to kind of burst them and disperse them and ground them back into the earth. But, if we're thinking too much, it's time to take a breath. Anyway, that's all the time we have today, everybody. I love you very, very much. Thank you for joining me next.